Chapter 1.
Chapter
The
1.
Nursery.
The Nursery.
Wendy,
Wendy,
John, and Michael Darling
Michael Darling
live in a lovely house in
live in a
London.
lovely house in London.
They have got a big, sunny nursery.
They have got a big
There are
nursery.
colorful
There are
pictures
pictures
and a big
and a
clock
big
on the
clock
wall.
on the wall.
There are
There are
toys
toys
here and there.
and there.
The Darlings are a
The
happy
Darling are a
family.
happy family.
Mr. Darling
Mr. Darling
and Mrs.
and
Darling
Mrs. Darling
love their
love
children
their
very
children
much.
very much.
Wendy is the
Wendy
first child.
the first child.
John is the
John
second.
is the second.
And Michael
Michael
is the third.
Is the third.
The children's
The
nanny
children's
is
nanny
called
is
Nana,
called Nana.
and she
And
is a
she's
big
a big
Newfoundland dog.
Newfoundland.
Her kennel is in the nursery, and she is a wonderful nanny. She loves the children, and the children love her. One evening, Mr. and Mrs. Darling want to go to a dinner party. They have their best clothes on. Nana, it's time to put the children to bed, says Mrs. Darling.
Google Workspace lo hace simple. Comparte tu agenda y deja que tus clientes...
Nana goes to the bathroom. She turns on the hot water for Michael's bath. She puts her paw in the water to check the temperature. It's perfect. I don't want to have a bath, says little Michael. But Nana is a firm nanny, and Michael has his bath. Then Nana gives the children their pajamas. Now they are ready for bed. Mrs. Darling comes into the nursery and smiles. Good work, Nana. I see the children are ready for bed. Nana wags her big tail. Suddenly, there is a noise. Mrs. Darling sees a young boy outside the nursery window. She is very surprised. Nana barks and shuts the window quickly. The boy's shadow falls on the floor. The young boy flies away. Who's there? Asks Mrs. Darling. She opens the window and looks outside, but she sees nothing. Then she sees the boy's shadow on the floor and says, "Poor boy, this is his shadow. Let's put it in the drawer." The children are in bed. Mr. Darling takes Nana to the garden. Then he goes to the sitting room and waits for Mrs. Darling. Mrs. Darling sings to the children and kisses them. She is a perfect mother. Soon the three children are sleeping. Mr. and Mrs. Darling go to their bedroom. They put on their coats and go to the dinner party. Chapter 2. The Shadow. The children are sleeping and dreaming. Suddenly, the window opens. A small ball of light enters the nursery and flies around. It is a lovely
It's a
fairy
lovely
called
fairy
Tinkerbell.
Tinkerbell.
She is looking
She's
for
looking
something.
for something.
After a moment,
After a moment,
a young boy
a young
enters the
boy
nursery
enters the
and
nursery
says,
and says,
Tink, where are you?
Think, where are
Please
you?
find my shadow.
Find my shadow.
Tinkerbell
Tinkerbell
finds his
finds
shadow in the drawer
into the drawer
and gives it to him.
and give it to him.
Now I can stick
Now
the
I can
shadow
stick
to
the
my
shadow
feet
to my
with
feet
some
with
soap,
some soap.
he thinks.
He thinks.
He tries
He
and tries
and
again,
tries
but he
again,
can't.
But he can't.
He is very
He's very
confused
confused
and starts
and
crying.
start crying.
Wendy
Wendy
wakes up and
wakes
sees
up
the
and
boy,
sees the boy,
but she is
but
not
she's
afraid.
not afraid.
His clothes
His
are
clothes
made of
are
leaves.
made of leaves.
Little boy,
Little boy,
why are you
why are
crying?
you crying?
Wendy asks.
Wendy asks.
The boy takes
The
off
boy
his cap
takes off
and
his
asks,
cap and asks,
What's your name?
What's your name?
Wendy,
Wendy,
Moira, Angela, darling.
Angela, darling.
What's yours?
What's yours?
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
Is that all?
Is that all?
Yes,
Yes,
says Peter.
says Peter.
Then he thinks,
Then he thinks,
My name is
"My
very,
name is
very
very,
short.
Very short.
Wendy looks at his shadow and asks,
Can
I help you with your shadow?
Your shadow?
Yes,
Yes,
please, says Peter.
says Peter.
Wendy gets
Wendy
her
gets
sewing
her
basket
sewing basket
and sews on
sews
Peter's shadow. After a
After
few minutes,
a few
she
minutes,
says,
she says,
Finished.
Finished.
Now you have
Now
your
you have
shadow
your
again.
shadow again.
Peter looks
Peter
at the
looks
floor
at the floor
and sees
and
his
sees
shadow.
his shadow.
He is very
He's
happy
very happy
and dances around the
and
room.
dances around the room.
Oh, Wendy,
Oh,
you are
Wendy,
wonderful,
wonderful,
says Peter.
says Peter.
Do you really
Do you
think
really
so?
think so?
Asks Wendy.
Asked Wendy.
Yes,
Yes,
says Peter.
says Peter.
Wendy smiles
Wendy smiles
and gives
and
Peter
gives
a kiss
Peter a
on the
kiss
cheek.
on the cheek.
Oh,
Oh,
says Peter.
says Peter.
How nice.
How nice.
How old are you,
How old are
Peter?
you, Peter?
Asks Wendy.
Asked Wendy.
I don't know,
I don't know,
but I am young.
but I am young.
I don't want to
I
grow
don't
up.
want to grow up.
I always
I
want to be a
always want to
boy
be a
and
boy
have
and
fun.
have fun.
Peter looks around the
Peter looks
room
around
for
the
his
room for
fairy.
his fairy.
He hears a noise
He hears a
and
noise
looks in a drawer.
and looks on the drawer.
Tinkerbell flies
Tinkerbell
out.
Flies out.
Wendy is delighted to see a fairy, but Tinkerbell is afraid.
It's afraid.
She hides behind the big
Hide
clock.
behind a big clock.
Where do you live,
Where do
Peter?
you live, Peter?
Asks Wendy.
Asked Wendy.
I live
I
in
live
Neverland
in Neverland
with the Lost
with
Boys,
the Lost Boys.
says Peter.
Lost Boys.
Neverland?
Neverland?
The Lost
The
Boys?
Lost Boys?
Who are they?
Who are they?
Asks
Asked
Wendy.
Wendy.
The Lost Boys
Lost
haven't
Boys
got a mother
haven't got
or
a
father.
mother or father.
They are alone in the
They are
world,
alone in the
and
world.
they live in
And
Neverland.
they live in
I am their
and they live in
captain.
Neverland. I am their
In
captain.
Neverland,
In
we
Neverland,
fight the
we
pirates.
fight the pirates.
We also swim in the
also
lagoon
swim
with the beautiful
with the
mermaids.
beautiful mermaids.
Fairies live in the
Fairy
trees in the
In the
forest.
tree, in the forest.
The fairies are my
The fairies are
friends,
my friends,
says Peter.
says Peter.
Oh, what fun,
Oh, what fun,
says Wendy.
says Wendy.
I must go back
I must
now.
go back now.
I must tell the
I
lost
must tell
boys
the
a
lost
story.
boy a story.
They love stories,
They love
says
stories,
Peter.
says Peter.
Don't go away.
Don't go away.
I know a lot
I
of
know
stories,
a lot of stories,
says Wendy.
says Wendy.
Then come with me,
Then
Wendy.
come with me, Wendy.
You can tell us
You can tell
stories.
us stories.
We all want a
We
mother.
all want a mother.
Please come,
Please come,
says Peter.
says Peter.
But I can't fly,
I can fly,
says Wendy.
says Wendy.
I can teach
I
you to
can
fly,
te-
says
I
Peter.
can teach you to fly, says
Can
Peter.
you teach John and Michael
Teach
to fly
John
too?
and Michael to fly too?
Yes, of course,
Yes,
says
of course,
Peter.
says Peter.
John,
John,
Michael, wake up.
wake up.
This is Peter
This
Pan.
is Peter Pan.
He's from Neverland.
He's from Neverland.
It's a beautiful
It's
place,
a beautiful place,
says Wendy.
says Wendy.
John and Michael
John
are
and Michael
very
are
surprised.
surprised.
We can go there
can
with
go
him,
to where-
but first we must
But
learn to
first
fly,
we must learn
Wendy
to fly,
says.
Wendy says.
Wendy,
Wendy,
John,
John,
and Michael are
and Michael
very
are
excited.
very excited.
They try to
They
fly,
try to fly,
but fall on the beds
but
and
fall
on the
bed.
floor.
It's on the floor.
No,
No,
no, says Peter.
Says Peter.
Here is
Here
some
is
fairy
some
dust.
fairy dust.
He puts some fairy
puts
dust
some
on their
fairy dust.
shoulders.
On their shoulders. Viendo mi video de práctica, creo que debo subir un poco o modular más mi voz y el volumen. Hay partes en las que se me dificulta porque siento que hay palabras que se juntan y como que confundo la palabra o confundo, sí, en una frase a veces es como se juntan las palabras y los sonidos cambian, entonces es como, ay, ¿qué palabra es? Pero en general siento que me siento mucho mejor en esta práctica, siento que me fue muy bien. Me gustó mucho el cuento, me gustó mucho la fluidez del autor y me gustó mucho la práctica. Verdaderamente me siento muy cómoda y hasta aquí mi retroalimentación.